did a study for AE 911 Truth from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and the purpose of that was to examine the cause of failure of Building 7 that came down at 5:20 in the afternoon on September the 11th, 2001. I had 2 PhD students working for me, and I had one using Abacus, which is a piece of very sophisticated software, and AutoCAD. The other one using SAP 2000, which is an engineering software package out of California, originally developed at Berkeley. So the first and foremost thing that I did is I began to look at where the centroid of this building in plan view was at, and where the thermal point of zero movement horizontally was at. Those 2 points is where I began. That the building movement horizontally, thermally, was not from east to west, as NIST said, but it was actually from west to east. NIST made a big error right from the get-go, and that was they chose to say that the exterior of the building was extremely stiff. Matter of fact, they assumed it was fixed. And by so doing, if you heated up the floor system, it was going to move away from the most fixity spot. It was moving from the point of zero movement, the most stiff spot, which was near the elevator shafts. So that changed everything in terms of what NIST was looking at. Because the first thing they said, that the building came down, column 79 collapsed, creating all these issues, and consequently, the girder 82001 slipped off of the bearing support, which created all these problems. None of that happened that way. None of it. We also noticed, quite interestingly enough, that the temperature within the building did not get hot enough to cause deterioration or weakening of the structural steel in the load carrying capacity direction. What happened with NIST is they didn't account for the fact that there were stiffeners at the girder and the column interface. It made a huge difference. Through that process, it became very clear that we could not agree with most of the things that NIST had done scientifically. Now, where do we go from here? What did that building experience on that day? How did it come down? It became very clear, very quickly, that, and I say very quickly, that the failure was going to be coming down as a global collapse. In other words, all of the interior columns over 8 stories came down, were basically lost at once. About 1.3 seconds later, the exterior columns also then experienced it. So somewhere between below the 17th floor or below, there was no resistance to failure, and that whole building then collapsed. And if you look at my solution, our solutions, the 2 PhD students and myself, if you look at that solution and compare our video of the structural collapse, which was based upon software, it looks almost identical to actually what happened in the field. Okay, our conclusions were that the building did not come down by a progressive collapse. You'll notice that in my report I changed it to say global collapse, meaning that all of the interior columns within the on a given floor over 8 stories broke out at once. About 1.3 seconds later, the exterior columns came down. Probably 17 stories and below, there was no support. There was no resistance. All of that had to disappear immediately. I leave it to your imagination what may have produced that problem.